Crack. The hull screamed before silence took over. A Terran scout ship, Odyssey's Reach, disintegrated in a blaze of shrapnel above an uncharted exoplanet. The Zirathai had not seen such a vessel before, nor anything quite like its sole survivor. Lieutenant Mara Jensen's vitals were erratic as she was brought aboard the Zirathai cruiser Vol Enlightenment. Her skin was lacerated, bones broken, internal hemorrhaging active, and yet she lived. Not just clinging to life, fighting. Her pain response thresholds puzzled the ship's autodoc. Her adrenaline levels were beyond fatal for most known species. Fascinating, muttered Dr. Virox, the chief xenobiologist. His ocular nodules blinked independently, a subconscious tell that betrayed his interest. She is dying, one of the med drones said. She's not, he replied. The Enlightenment was not a warship. It was a floating library of life, helmed by scholars and scientists whose evolutionary paths had long since abandoned chaos, competition, and what the Zirathai called irrational spontaneity. Virox examined the Terran's anatomy with cold amusement. So, inefficient. A skeleton of calcium? Redundant organs. Immune system constantly at war with itself. How did these creatures ever reach space? Her injuries are repairing, noted Subdoctor Nell, a junior xenopathologist. Naturally. Without augmentation. Impossible, Virox snorted. She's an outlier at best. At worst, a data error. He jabbed one of his long, multi-jointed digits toward the diagnostic hollow panel. Initiate a full biopsy suite. Let's see what tricks the meat sack is hiding. Mara woke to a sterile ceiling. No alarms, no painkillers, just bright, cold alien light. Her eyes flicked to the shape looming over her. Tall, insectal, semi-bipedal, with gleaming chitinous plates and a translucent cranial crest. The creature was observing her like a lab rat. She blinked, smirked, then rasped. Well, either I'm dead, or this is one hell of a VA hospital. Virox flinched. You are awake?
Yeah. Pity.
She pushed herself up with a groan. Her ribs disagreed. Let me guess. You're the local Grim Reaper? I am Dr. Virox, Chief of Biointegrity aboard the Vol Enlightenment. Oh, good. A nerd. Her voice was hoarse, yet laced with defiance. Her sarcasm confused him. He glanced at her biosigns, elevated heart rate, minor tremors, pain index off the charts, and yet her neural activity was sharp, focused. What are you feeling? Virox asked clinically. Disrespected. Also, thirsty. They brought her water. Well, something close. It tasted like algae and copper, but it beat dying. Jensen noticed they hadn't restrained her. They assumed her injuries were enough. Classic mistake. Why am I here? She asked, sipping. You were retrieved. Your species is not catalogued in the Central Bioindex. You are, for lack of a better word, a specimen. Jensen snorted. Well, thanks for the hospitality, Doc Mengel. You are unstable, he said flatly. Emotionally, neurologically, biologically. Yeah, humans are messy like that. He leaned in, scanning her neural pulses. Your brain structure is redundant. Why two hemispheres competing for control? We like arguments, she said. He made a low clicking noise that passed for laughter. Your kind evolved through conflict, didn't you? Is there another way? Over the next 2 days, Jensen endured test after test. Her blood reacted strangely to alien stimuli. She healed too quickly. She metabolized unfamiliar proteins. Her pain tolerance adapted dynamically. And her neural patterns didn't stabilize, they fluctuated, constantly creating new routes. Every minute she's alive, her data changes, Nell whispered to Virox. She should be dead, Virox said. Her species defies biological prediction. Nell hesitated. Then, perhaps our model is incomplete. Virox scoffed. Don't be absurd. All life follows systems. Cause and effect. Genes and outcome. Chaos is just unmeasured order. Yet, something gnawed at him. This human, Mara, wasn't just surviving. She was watching them. Learning. On the third day, Jensen demanded to speak with the ship's AI. You're a patient, not a diplomat, Virox said. I'm a survivor, she corrected. And I'd like to survive long enough to not be a lab rat. Your biology is unstable. Your vitals are inconsistent with intelligent function. And your behavior is spontaneous, she smirked. Dangerous. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Let me tell you something, Virox. I've hiked across sulfuric landscapes in a homemade pressure suit. I've jury-rigged oxygen filters from soda cans and duct tape. I've been shot, stabbed, and marooned on a moon with no atmosphere. She jabbed her thumb into her chest. And I'm still here. He said nothing, so she added. Your people catalog things. You dissect and quantify. But you don't understand struggle. You sterilized it out of yourselves. For the first time, Virox had no retort. Later, Nell approached Jensen in private. I have never met a being who questioned the doctors, Nell said. Most yield. Yeah, that's not really a thing we do, Jensen replied. Nell looked puzzled. Why? Because we don't know how to quit. We evolved alongside predators, disease, war, and each other. Pain taught us how to think faster. Loss made us invent better. Fear made us brave. Nell tilted her head. Your strength comes from dysfunction? Jensen gave a half-smile. Depends how you define it. That night, Virox pored over her test results again. Her blood showed rapid microadaptations to foreign enzymes. Her brainwave patterns had become more complex after each trauma event. He checked and rechecked the data. No known species reacted this way to stress. Not even artificially enhanced ones. She learns biologically, he whispered. Stress makes her stronger. It didn't make sense. But perhaps that was the point. The next morning, Virox entered her chamber and said nothing for several minutes. Jensen raised an eyebrow. Lose a bet. He ignored her jab. We found traces of adaptive gene expression in your lymphatic system, he said finally. Rapid restructuring of antigen receptors. It violates every known model. You're welcome. He walked slowly around her. Contemplative. You are not an anomaly. You are representative, aren't you? Jensen met his gaze, and in a tone as calm as it was chilling, she said. Humanity doesn't fear the unknown, Doctor. We become it. The simulation chamber was designed for controlled experimentation, not chaos. Yet, as the gravity fluctuated between tolerable and catastrophic, as temperature gradients shattered expected norms, and as atmospheric composition veered wildly, the human subjects adapted, not perfectly, but persistently. Dr. Virox watched in stunned silence as Lieutenant Mara Jensen and the 3 other humans responded not with panic, but with calculated improvisation. What is she doing with that emergency pack? Asked Sub-Dr. Nell. Converting it, Virox muttered, narrowing his ocular nodules. Into some kind of breathable hood? She tore apart our pressure regulator and used the liner to build a mask. That shouldn't work. It shouldn't, Virox agreed grimly. And yet, earlier that cycle, a Concord diplomat had arrived aboard the Vol Enlightenment. A sleek, gliding member of the Vari species named Counselor Drix, they exuded disdain the moment they laid eyes on the Terrans. Your specimens are crude, Drix said, antennae twitching. Emotional. They barely qualify as sapient under Concord classification. They do more than qualify, Virox replied stiffly. They exceed baselines in neural complexity, muscular redundancy, and adaptive physiology. Then their value is as shock troops, Drix sniffed. Blunt tools. Unpredictable, yes, but hardly refined. Jensen had overheard this from a holding corridor. Later, while flexing a recently healed shoulder, she muttered to Dr. Raj Mehta, he's got the attitude of a food critic and the jawline of a praying mantis. Mehta chuckled. Keep making jokes. You'll confuse them into surrender. That was the unspoken truth. The Concord didn't understand humans, not really. Their entire civilization was built around predictability, systems, and long-optimized evolutionary paths. They saw emotion as a vestigial byproduct of primitive competition. But humans? Humans were unpredictable by design. The stress test was supposed to be a controlled environment. Temperature at 42 degrees Celsius. Gravity at 1.3 g. Atmospheric variance held within plus or minus 10% Earth norm. Just enough to measure strain and resilience. Then something went wrong. The chamber's containment protocols glitched. Blame was later placed on outdated firmware, and the conditions began to fluctuate beyond safety margins. Instead of halting the test, the Concorde observers paused, curious to see how the humans would respond. And respond they did. Inside the simulation room, Captain Lena Ortiz, team lead of the human delegation, was already barking orders. Jensen, find the pressure valve. Meta, check O2 levels. Watanabe, prep emergency stabilizers. Already ahead of you, Jensen said, yanking a panel free from a wall. Sparks flew. The simulation shifted again. Gravity dropped suddenly to near zero, sending two of the Concorde technicians watching from the gallery into a panic. One fainted from disorientation. Inside the chamber, the humans floated calmly. Watanabe spun midair and used his belt to anchor them to the nearest grip bar. Almost nostalgic, he muttered. Reminds me of station drills on Luna. Yeah, but with worse music, Ortiz replied, her lips chapped but her expression calm. Outside, Virox leaned forward. The other Concorde doctors whispered in hushed disbelief. They're adapting in real time, using muscle memory to control drift, rerouting internal breathing patterns. Jensen just used her own clothing to muffle the air intake and trap humidity, Nell said in awe. That's primitive. And brilliant. Low-tech problem-solving, Virox said softly.
They don't panic.
They improvise. Counselor Drix was less impressed. They're erratic, unstable. That cannot be the model for galactic integration. They're alive, Virox said, tone sharper than usual. And life is not tidy. Once the chamber was stabilized, the humans emerged, tired but grinning. Jensen waved as if she'd just left a sauna. So, what score did we get? She asked, sweat dripping off her jawline. There was no score, Virox replied. The chamber malfunctioned. Jensen raised a brow. Malfunction? Looked more like a crash course in adaptation to me. Counselor Drix spoke from the observation deck. Your methods are not elegant. Survival by brute instinct is not civilization. It is savagery. Ortiz stepped forward. Elegance doesn't pull you out of a shipwreck. Survival does. Your people think hardship is a flaw to eliminate. We think it's a teacher. Drix turned away. Ortiz added quietly, We've buried our dead under alien skies and kept going. Tell me another species in your Concorde who would still try. That evening, the humans were given quarters with access to the Concorde Archive network. Meta pored over centuries of alien medical data. Their immune systems are optimized for stability, he noted. Almost no autoimmune issues, no viral diversity. Jensen stretched. Because they've never had to fight for survival. Not like we have. Meta nodded. They evolved on predictable worlds. Stable climates. Earth is hell by comparison. Exactly, Ortiz said. We didn't adapt in spite of our planet. We adapted because of it. Nell, watching through a live feed, whispered to Virox. They survived wars, plagues, extinction events, and kept evolving. Their pain bred resilience. Virox looked over the updated blood work from the stress chamber. Antibody production had doubled within hours. Neural activity had increased during physical trauma. One of the subjects had actually improved their cardiac efficiency under gravitational strain. It's not logical, he murmured. It's human, Nell said. Later, Virox visited the human quarters himself. Jensen greeted him with a salute and a smirk. Back for round two?
No.
For answers. He stared at her for a long moment. You should not have survived that chamber. The simulation was uncontrolled. The environment was lethal to half the Concorde species. And yet you adapted. Improvise. She shrugged. It's what we do. He looked genuinely bewildered.
How?
Jensen leaned forward. Pain doesn't scare us. It educates us. Fear teaches us what we're willing to die for. You evolved to avoid chaos. We evolved through it. Virox didn't reply immediately, but then he said something shocking. I ran your genome through our threat matrix. You triggered 4 red-level alerts. Is that a bad thing? He almost smiled. Depends on your point of view. The next cycle, Virox stood before a panel of Concord scientists, delivering a formal report. The humans are not anomalies, he said. They are consistent in their inconsistency. Their biology is not elegant, it is adaptive, redundant, imperfect, but shockingly effective. We must reconsider our metrics for evaluating sapient resilience. Some nodded. Others scoffed. Counselor Drix hissed, You're enamored by chaos. I am aware of its utility, Virox replied, eyes narrowing. They aren't optimized machines. They are iterative systems. Like nature, like life. And they endure. That night, as the human delegation ate together, meat substitute for protein, mashed plant analog for starch, Jensen raised a cup of something vaguely coffee-like. To chaos, she said. Ortiz raised hers too. To survival. Meta added. To freaking out the aliens. They all clinked their cups. Virox watched from a distance. And though he couldn't admit it aloud, not yet, he smiled. The lights in the Xenomedical lab dimmed automatically as the quantum diagnostic array spun up. A hush fell over the room. This wasn't just another scan, it was the final sequencing of the human genome, cellular behaviors, and neural response patterns under extreme conditions. It was the dataset that would either vindicate Dr. Virox's obsession or destroy his career. The system chimed. Test results complete. A dozen data modules flickered into life, charts and variables scrolling so fast that Nell blinked her secondary eyelids. This isn't possible, she whispered. They show variability across non-inherited gene sequences. Her DNA, Jensen's, it's rewriting on a cellular level based on experience. Virox stared, his breath catching. Evolution in real time. Meanwhile, in the human quarters, Lieutenant Mara Jensen worked through push-ups, her body still sore from the environmental chamber incident. Captain Ortiz monitored encrypted data exchanges on her pad, frowning. Commands quiet, Ortiz muttered. Too quiet. Yeah, Jensen said, flipping to sit cross-legged. We're either a diplomatic miracle or a containment problem. Dr. Mehta entered, holding a report. Correction, we're both. He handed it over. Ortiz scanned the Concord medical summary. They finally sequenced us. Jensen grinned. And they're terrified. Back in the lab, the Concord science panel had gathered. Virox stood at the central console, gesturing toward a rotating 3D model of a human cell. Here, he said, highlighting a glowing node near the mitochondrial nucleus, is where their anomaly lies. It's not just repair, it's reprogramming. Mara Jensen's body is adapting to foreign environments, pathogens, even emotional stimuli. Her lymphocytes mutated after exposure to stress in our chamber. Uncontrolled mutation is dangerous, said Counselor Drix. It leads to instability, collapse. And yet, Virox replied, they thrive. Nell pulled up a neural scan. During extreme duress, the human brain increases redundancy, activating alternate cognitive paths, even when physically damaged. Jensen retained tactical awareness under neural hypoxia. She functioned under conditions where we would lapse into coma, Virox added. A pause. Then Drix snapped. So what? They're unstable warbeasts. That doesn't make them allies. It makes them threats. Isn't that the point of resilience? Virox replied quietly. To be threatening to those who seek to dominate you? Later, Virox found Jensen in the ship's greenhouse. She was crouched by a tank of purple algae, poking at it with a curiosity that reminded him of children. When she noticed him, she stood, wiping her hands on her trousers. Let me guess, the test results came back. They did. And you are not what we expected. She smirked. I get that a lot. Virox hesitated. Then, your species is not evolutionarily stable. You are chaos in motion. Sounds about right. But you endure. You learn. And you adapt faster than any race in Concord history. Still want to dissect me? No, he said. Now I want to understand you. That night, Jensen lay awake, staring at the smooth, sterile ceiling of her quarters. She remembered her first field deployment, a rescue op on a broken satellite station, flames in zero-G, a child's scream in a vacuum-sealed hallway. Her squad lost 2 people that day. She remembered the pain, but more than that, she remembered learning, getting smarter, faster, sharper. Humanity didn't just survive hardship, it refined itself through it. And now the Concorde had seen that. She wasn't sure they liked it. The next day brought a diplomatic emergency. A new species, the Corvalin, arrived for a Concorde summit. Amphibious, calculating, and pathologically obsessed with genetic purity, they immediately demanded access to the human specimens, citing containment protocol violations. They view us as disease vectors, Ortiz said, reading the diplomatic memo. They want us isolated, maybe sterilized. Jensen scowled. And how's the Concorde responding? By doing what bureaucrats do best, stalling. Meta added, the Corvalin have influence. If they push hard enough, the humans might become a political liability. Ortiz's jaw tightened. Or a target. In the senior council chambers, Councillor Drix addressed the assembly. Human biological instability poses a long-term existential threat. Their gene fluidity undermines our environmental equilibrium. Their psychological volatility risks cultural contamination. They must be removed from Concorde space until they can be safely studied, preferably in isolation. Virox rose. And yet, they are more resilient than any known life form. Their instability is their strength. Their ability to survive, not with augmentation or technology, but with raw determination and adaptability, surpasses our understanding. Drix spat. They are a fire. We cannot bring fire into the archives and call it a gift. Virox looked Drix in the eye. Perhaps fire is what your cold halls need. The humans were summoned to the tribunal, not as guests, as subjects. Jensen stepped forward, arms behind her back. Her wounds had healed, her spine straightened, and her voice was steel. You invited us here, she said. To study, to observe. You wanted to know what makes us different. The chamber was silent. Well, here's your answer. We're not the strongest, not the smartest, not the fastest, but we never stop. You throw storms at us and we build shelters. You burn our cities and we build rockets. She turned to face the Corvalin emissary. You're afraid of us because you can't predict us. But we're not your enemy. We're your future. The emissary hissed. You speak like conquerors. No, she replied. We speak like survivors. And in this galaxy, that's the only thing that matters. Back in the lab, Virox watched final simulations run on human genomic behavior. In 87% of tested scenarios, humanity survived longer than Concorde species when exposed to collapse scenarios, biological warfare, environmental degradation, psychological warfare. The AI summary displayed one conclusion in stark letters. Homo sapiens. Maximum viable resilience class 1. Unclassified adaptive potential. Recommend reevaluation. He turned to Nell. We misjudged them. We try to fit them into our systems, she said. But they're not a system. They're an engine. As Virox walked down the corridor toward the human quarters, the ship trembled. Red alert. Unscheduled gravimetric surge. From the observation deck, space bent like glass under stress. An ancient mining station on the edge of the sector had collapsed into a micro-wormhole, threatening nearby ships, including the Vol Enlightenment. Escape routes flickered out. Auto-navigation scrambled. Concorde personnel panicked. The humans, however, moved like clockwork. Ortiz barked orders. Meta rerouted reactor power. Jensen sprinted to engineering. Inside the chaos, she looked at an alien console and smiled. Guess I'll wing it. The ship screamed. Not in any literal, audible way. Its hull was far too advanced for that, but through shuddering vibrations, warning sirens, and flashing panels that bathed the corridors in emergency red. The Vol Enlightenment, pride of the Concorde fleet, was being dragged into a gravitational anomaly that shouldn't exist. An artificial wormhole, unstable, twitching between dimensional fault lines like a spark on wet flint, had formed out of a collapsed mining station, churning debris and stellar mass into its hungry maw. And right on the edge of that chaos, for humans, one bewildered medical team, and the Concorde's most prestigious diplomatic council.
Perfect.
In the central engineering chamber, Lieutenant Mara Jensen stared at the alien control panel. Nothing was in a recognizable format. No Earth standard UI. No helpful blinking prompts. Just lines of glyphs, energy flow diagrams, and variables measured in units her mind didn't fully grasp. Good thing she didn't need to. "I've rerouted coolant to stabilize core temps," said Dr. Raj Mehta, hunched over an auxiliary system. "That'll buy us 6, maybe 7 minutes." Captain Ortiz patched in from command. "That's not enough. Jensen, can you trigger a gravity pulse and counter the wormhole's pull?" Jensen took a breath, cracking her knuckles. "Gimme a minute." "We don't have a minute. Then I'll do it in 30 seconds. Outside, on the observation deck, alien scientists were in disarray. Panels sparked. Technicians scrambled. Counselor Drix screamed over the comms. "Eject the human quarters. Vent them if you must. They're destabilizing the systems." "False," Dr. Virox growled. "They're stabilizing them." He pointed to the telemetry feed. Human patch systems were responding faster than Concorde native interfaces. Jensen's energy redirection loop had lowered core strain by 12%. Meta's heat-venting mod had kept a reactor surge from melting half the stern. The humans weren't part of the problem. They were the only part of the solution. Jensen found the magnetic pulse governor and immediately hated it. It was too elegant, too safe. "This thing won't hold," she muttered. "It's designed for regulated shifts, not brute counterforce." "What's the alternative?" Meta asked. Jensen grinned. "We break it." She jammed her multi-tool into the magnetic polarity housing and started rewiring it by feel. "I'm going to overcharge the gravity capacitors. We'll fire a reverse pulse at the anomaly. It might tear the ship in half." Meta blinked. "That's insane." "I know." He nodded. "I'll get the fusion relays synced." On the bridge, Ortiz was already pulling up structural override controls. "Seal all non-essential bulkheads," she ordered. "Brace for gravitational whiplash." Drix's voice blared across the internal network. "You have no authorization. You will destroy the—" Ortiz cut the line. "Welcome to the Terran method, you pompous twig." Virox stood still amid the chaos. Around him, Nell and other Concorde scientists watched the data roll in: energy surges, stress fractures, rapidly fluctuating power levels. None of it made sense. And yet, under the humans' control, it was working. "They're not fighting the anomaly," Nell whispered. "They're dancing with it." Virox finally understood. The humans didn't see chaos as something to defeat. They embraced it, found rhythm in it. They surfed entropy the way birds rode thermals, facing the unthinkable not with fear, but with ingenuity. Inside the engine core, Jensen flicked the last switch. "Here comes the fun part," she said. The reverse gravity pulse spilt energy like a ticking bomb. Panels cracked. Lights flickered. The entire ship groaned like an animal resisting the jaws of a predator. Then Jensen slammed the ignition.
Boom.
The gravity well pulsed outward in a concussive shockwave. Space rippled like a pond struck by a hammer. The wormhole spasmed, and with a shriek across all sensor channels, it buckled in on itself and collapsed. The ship spun. Jensen was thrown against the wall, her shoulder crunching. Meta rolled across the floor. Silence. Then the emergency lights clicked green. The Vol Enlightenment had survived. And it was because of the humans. In the aftermath, the Concorde Council convened for an emergency session. Every representative species had watched the telemetry feeds. Every race had seen the humans disobey, improvise, gamble, and save their flagship. Drix's voice was hollow now. "They are unpredictable. Rogue elements." Virox rose. "They are resilient, and we would be fools to reject what they bring." Counselor Caria of the Thul, a species known for philosophical neutrality, leaned forward. You believe these humans represent something new. Not new, Vyrox said. Primal. But honed. Fire, yes. But fire that forges. Caria looked thoughtful. Then perhaps it is time we warmed our hands. Captain Ortiz sat quietly in her quarters, watching the stars. Jensen entered, shoulder in a sling. They're not kicking us out, Jensen said. In fact, we've been invited to join a new initiative. Ortiz arched an eyebrow. Initiative. Adaptive Response Fleet. Concord wants us to help them handle threats outside their standard models. Crisis zones. Rogue systems. Uncharted anomalies. So, basically, when things get weird, they call us. Exactly. Ortiz snorted. Figures. Later, Vyrox approached Jensen alone. He held out a data pad. These are the full medical reports, he said. We've decided to change the classification of your species. To what? Humanity. Class 1 Resilience Entity. Status. Exceptional viability. Strategic asset. Jensen raised an eyebrow. So, we're no longer a threat? He smiled, something rare and genuine. Oh, you're still a threat. But now we understand why that's not a bad thing. As the humans prepared to depart for their next posting, Vyrox watched their shuttle lift off, streaking toward the stars. They were unorthodox, unpredictable, and sometimes, yes, terrifying. But he had come to realize that was not a flaw. It was their advantage. In a galaxy full of order, tradition, and structure, humans were the wild variable, an evolving paradox that refused to fit the mold. They were not invaders, not anomalies. They were force of nature. And perhaps, in the chaos that lay ahead, that was exactly what the galaxy needed.